The world headlines. House passes bill to boost U.S. computer chip production.
Democrats muscled through legislation in the House on Friday that they say positions the United States to better compete with China economically and on the global stage by strengthening the domestic semiconductor industry and shoring up strained supply chains. The bill passed by a vote of 222 to 210. It marks an important step for a top Biden administration priority, but the legislation is likely to be extensively revised as negotiators reconcile differences with what the Senate passed about 8 months ago. President Joe Biden urged lawmakers to reach a deal quickly, saying, "America can't afford to wait." The nearly 3,000-page bill, not counting scores of amendments added this week, includes massive investments designed to boost semiconductor manufacturing in the U.S. The big-ticket items include about $52 billion in grants and subsidies to help the semiconductor industry and $45 billion to strengthen supply chains for high-tech products. But Democrats also tucked in other priorities that have raised GOP concerns about the bill's cost and scope. Representative Adam Kinzinger of Illinois was the only Republican to vote for the measure, while Representative Stephanie Murphy of Florida was the only Democrat to vote against it. The bill includes $8 billion for a fund that helps developing countries adjust to climate change, $3 billion for facilities to make the U.S. less reliant on Chinese solar components, $4 billion to help communities with significantly higher unemployment than the national average, and $10.5 billion for states to stockpile drugs and medical equipment. Democrats were in a celebratory mood prior to the vote after the latest jobs report showed employers added 467,000 jobs in January. They said the legislation would lead to more good news on that front. The bill we're talking about today is a jobs bill for manufacturing in America, for making it in America, Pelosi said.
African Union, focus on rights, justice at summit.
President Macky Sall of Senegal should ensure that civilian protection, human rights, and justice and accountability are the focus of the African Union's agenda as he takes over leadership of the 55-country body, Human Rights Watch said today. The African Union AU Summit is scheduled for February 5 to 6, 2022. Senegal's President Macky Sall is taking up the presidency of the African Union as the continent faces enormous security and health challenges, political upheaval, and social unrest, said Karine Kaniza Nantulia, Africa Advocacy Director at Human Rights Watch. Despite the challenges, Sall has an opportunity to demonstrate the AU's leadership and commitment to its founding principles by taking bold, uncompromising stances against state-sponsored abuses, responding to victims' calls for protection and justice, and pressing for equal and fair multilateral relations with the global North. African leaders meeting in Addis Ababa should give priority to addressing the rampant abuses occurring in the conflict in Ethiopia between fighters affiliated with the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, and the Ethiopian federal government and its allies, including Eritrea. The conflict, now ongoing for more than a year, is having a devastating impact on civilians. Many violations by Ethiopia's warring parties are war crimes, and some may amount to crimes against humanity. Despite recently allowing limited humanitarian supplies to enter Tigray via air, the federal government has for 7 months maintained an effective siege on the region, preventing millions of people from accessing food, medicine, cash, and fuel, as well as basic services.
Economics 101, driver pay will keep moving higher.
Truckload carriers started raising driver pay nearly a year and a half ago as demand skyrocketed. Following the initial COVID outbreak, consumers changed their spending habits to ready themselves for a prolonged period of at-home living, which meant more trucks would be needed to bring more household and durable goods to market. The need for additional capacity has been tough to meet for an industry that perpetually struggles to recruit and retain drivers. The pandemic exacerbated a shortfall on the supply side as driver schools were forced to close or operate at reduced capacity, and many drivers left the industry for competitive pay in other sectors. The Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse also went into effect just ahead of the outbreak and started sidelining drivers shortly thereafter. The industry was light some 80,000 drivers in 2021, according to the American Trucking Associations, a number the group estimates could double by 2030 if the current trajectory holds. ACT Research's Driver Availability Index was down 2.4 percentage points in December to 35.5. A reading below 50 means the driver market is deteriorating. The index bottomed in the mid-teens in March and has been rebounding since. A spike in the Omicron variant was cited as a reason for the modest reversal from November. Higher wages, added perks, and simpler pay programs. While there appears to be no immediate fix to attract candidates to an industry that requires working long hours, nights and weekends, and being away from home for extended periods, carriers will continue to solve for capacity through wage increases. We're fortunately getting to a point where we're able to charge enough to maybe get those wage levels up to a point that is representative of what they should get based on what they have to do each and every day, Jim Richards, President and CEO at temperature-controlled carrier KLLM Transport Services, told FreightWaves in an interview.
Overnight Healthcare Medicare to cover at-home COVID-19 tests.
Welcome to Thursday's Overnight Healthcare, where we're following the latest moves on policy and news affecting your health. Minnesota's Name a Snowplow contest returned this year with 8 new trucks, including Betty Whiteout, Control Salt Delete, and Scoop Dog. After an outcry, Medicare is planning to cover the cost of some at-home COVID-19 tests for beneficiaries and people with Medicare Advantage. At-home Medicare COVID tests coming. Medicare will soon start to pay for at-home COVID-19 tests, allowing beneficiaries to have the same access to free over-the-counter tests as people with private insurance. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services on Thursday announced a new initiative that will allow Medicare beneficiaries and people with Medicare Advantage plans to access up to 8 over-the-counter COVID-19 tests per month for free at participating pharmacies and retailers, beginning in the early spring. Medicare will directly reimburse participating pharmacies and other retailers, allowing Medicare beneficiaries to pick up tests at no cost. The agency did not say how many retailers will be participating. There are a number of issues that have made it difficult to cover and pay for over-the-counter COVID-19 tests. However, given the importance of expanding access to testing, CMS has identified a pathway that will expand access to free over-the-counter testing for Medicare beneficiaries, the agency said in a statement. The White House last month began requiring private insurance companies to cover the cost of 8 at-home COVID-19 tests per person each month, if the customer files for reimbursement.
Winter storm disrupts U.S. with power outages and icy roads.
A sprawling winter storm reaching from North Texas to upstate New York continued its relentless trek across the country on Thursday, leaving thousands stranded at airports, shivering in their homes, and facing freezing rain on icy roads. Heavy snow and freezing rain were forecast to continue into Friday from the southwestern United States to New England, according to the National Weather Service, while portions of the South could see flash flooding and tornadoes. Governor Greg Abbott of Texas called it one of the most significant icing events that we've had in the state of Texas in at least several decades. More than 5,000 flights across the country were canceled by Thursday afternoon, the worst day for cancellations since April 2020, at the outset of the coronavirus pandemic, and more than 2,300 were delayed, according to FlightAware, a tracking website. Dallas was hit particularly hard, with at least 65% of outgoing flights temporarily grounded at its largest airport until a runway could be reopened around lunchtime. Power outages were a problem, too, with at least 300,000 homes and businesses losing electricity along the storm's path, primarily in Ohio and Tennessee. People posed for photos in front of a large tree that fell across a street in Memphis, credit Houston Cofield for the New York Times. The arrival of single-digit temperatures, snow, and sleet in North Texas came nearly a year after an 8-day freeze caused widespread power outages, plunging the state into darkness and claiming the lives of more than 240 people. Mr. Abbott on Texas sought to reassure the state's 29 million residents that this time, the power grid would hold.
Longfellow school culture is looking up as visits to the principal's office decline.
The number of students referred to the principal's office is down 5-fold at Longfellow Middle School compared with fall 2019, the last time classes were held fully in person. Students are typically referred to the office for moderately serious misbehavior, such as stealing a backpack, that doesn't warrant a suspension, but is serious enough to involve the principal or vice principal. School leaders say the decline in office visits, there were fewer than 60 this fall, is the product of a larger effort by a new administration to promote a positive culture at a school that has at times struggled with student behavior. A May 2020 report described behavior from certain, chaotic, classrooms spilling out into the hallways. Principal Paco Furlan, previously the longtime principal of Rosa Parks Elementary, and Vice Principal Salida Mitchell, a graduate of Longfellow, took the helm in fall 2020 after former Principal Stacy Wyatt resigned the previous spring. Furlan said he and Mitchell have worked to ramp up positive behavior interventions, reduce class sizes to about 20 students per class, and increase student supervision, including from dads volunteering during lunch, among other changes. Now, some teachers and students say the effort is paying off. Our admin team has set a tone that I really like. They are loving demanders, and they're loving first, said Mary Patterson, a 6th grade teacher at Longfellow who has taught at Berkeley Unified since 1990. The result, she said, is, the school is just run better.
Top Americans to watch at 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing.
The 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing will kick off with the opening ceremony on Friday. 4 years ago in Pyeongchang, South Korea, Team USA finished 4th in both total medals, 23, and gold medals, 9. They will look to improve on that tally this time around, featuring a mix of longtime stars closing out their careers and up-and-comers looking to create names for themselves. The Post's Jared Schwartz identifies the top American athletes to watch at the Beijing Games. Chloe Kim. Snowboarding, halfpipe. When Kim landed back-to-back 1,080-degree spins, 1080s, 4 years ago, she not only took over her sport, she immediately became a national star. At just 17, she won gold in the halfpipe, becoming the youngest American ever to medal and the youngest woman ever to win gold in snowboarding. Throughout the competition, she captured fans' hearts with lighthearted tweets and interviews, often just moments before her dominant performances. Following her gold medal win in Pyeongchang, Kim was featured on the cover of Sports Illustrated. She made the rounds of the late-night shows, got her own Barbie doll and landed on the Kellogg's Corn Flakes box, which set a new record for fastest-selling cereal box in company history. Later that year, she took home 3 ESPYs, Best Female Athlete, Best Female Olympian and Best Female Action Sports Athlete. In 2019, Kim was featured in Nike's Dream Crazier ad with Serena Williams, Simone Biles, Megan Rapinoe and other female athletes, which appeared during the Academy Awards. Kim's rapid ascension in American and international consciousness was not, however, without its challenges.
Will North Carolina beat Duke and other picks for Saturday's biggest college basketball games?
The number 9 Duke Blue Devils will make their final trip to Chapel Hill in the Coach K era on Saturday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, ESPN and ESPN app, meeting the North Carolina Tar Heels in one of 3 compelling Sonic blockbuster matchups on this weekend's slate. Saturday also sees the number 8 Baylor Bears traveling to meet the number 10 Kansas Jayhawks, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, ESPN and ESPN app, in a top 10 matchup at storied Allen Fieldhouse, while the streaking number 5 Kentucky Wildcats travel to meet an up-and-down but immensely talented Alabama Crimson Tide squad, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, ESPN and ESPN app. With that in mind, ESPN's college basketball team of Myron Metcalf, Jeff Borzello, John Gassaway, and Joe Lunardi made their predictions for all 3 big games on the Saturday slate, while also IDing some of the other top matchups of the first college basketball weekend of February. What has surprised you most about North Carolina, 16-6, 8-3 ACC, in year 1 of the Hubert Davis era? What do the Tar Heels have to do to beat Duke? Lunardi, don't look now, but North Carolina could take over the top spot in the ACC with a win over Duke. That's a commentary on the lackluster ACC, of course, but also on UNC's resilience. The Tar Heels seemed destined for the bubble after back-to-back losses at Miami and Wake Forest by a combined 50 points. But have righted the ship with a 4-game winning streak. A friendly schedule has helped, along with some friendly whistles at Louisville, but February ain't about style points. The surprise, then, is Carolina even being in this position. Can the Heels keep it going and upset the hated Blue Devils? Let's say, yes, as Hubert Davis takes one from Coach K on his last official visit to Chapel Hill. AJ Griffin tells the Notre Dame crowd to quiet down after splashing in a mid-range jumper in the second half for Duke.
Beijing Olympics, what a diplomatic boycott means, and why some athletes have traveled with burner phones.
By doing so, India has joined a growing list of countries that will not send government delegations to the Chinese capital for the Winter Olympics. In December, the United States had announced a diplomatic boycott of the event. The United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Japan, New Zealand, and the Netherlands, among others, followed the US's lead and made a similar decision. While the 2008 Olympics were seen as China's coming-out party, the Winter Games have been dogged by controversies, ranging from the diplomatic boycotts to the safety of one of China's top players and concerns over the privacy of the visiting athletes. It simply means these countries will not send official government delegations to Beijing during the Games. Given the scale of the Olympics, high-ranking officials from a country's government often travel to the Olympics. These officials are often labeled as the VIP visitors. Last year, U.S. First Lady Jill Biden led an American delegation to the Tokyo Olympics. At the 2018 Winter Games in South Korea, American Vice President Mike Pence was present. There is no obligation for a head of state or high-ranking diplomats to visit the host nation. Does a diplomatic boycott affect athletes' participation? It doesn't. Unlike the 1980 Moscow Olympics and 1984 Los Angeles Games, a period when thousands of athletes did not participate due to the prevailing political situation at the time, athletes and officials from all countries will continue to take part in the Winter Olympics in Beijing unhindered. One of the key differences between then and now is the commercial angle. The Olympics are a billion-dollar enterprise, and a complete boycott could cost athletes, broadcasters, and the organizers a fortune. A diplomatic boycott is a token protest that has no impact on the sporting spectacle.
USA law aimed at Chinese forced labor to test companies on their ESG performance.
The Winter Olympics are to be held in Beijing soon and is seen drawing a lot of attention to Uyghur treatment in China. The Biden administration is enforcing a ban to prevent the importation of Chinese items that were produced using forced labor just in time for the Winter Olympic Games to begin in Beijing. The Department of Homeland Security is looking for best practices for ensuring supply chain openness and accountability for enterprises that rely on China for raw materials, partially finished items, and final goods. Activists, shareholders, legislators, and customers are all concerned about environmental, social, and corporate governance issues, making it a challenging issue to resolve. On June 21, the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, will begin executing the law passed in December, the law taking effect on that day. In response to mounting evidence that ethnic minorities in China's Xinjiang region, including the Uyghur people, have been forced to work in various industries including suppliers for apparel companies and food brands, solar panel makers, electric vehicle manufacturers, and tech firms. The bipartisan legislation was passed by both parties of Congress. Aaron Kramer, who is the CEO and president of BSR, which is a nonprofit involved in consulting 300 companies on worldwide issues and concerns including sustainable supply networks, said, "No company wants to have forced labor in their supply chains. As we see companies raising their ambition on a whole range of ESG topics, labor standards, labor practices, carbon, water, other natural resource inputs, human rights, supply chains are essential to achieving their goals." Importers and the U.S. Customs and Border Protection are being urged to share their knowledge about traceability and due diligence methods that can be used to prevent importing specific Chinese goods in a notice published in the Federal Register earlier this month.
Colorado-Oregon quotes University of Colorado athletics.
Colorado Associate Head Coach Mike Rohn. On difference between first and second half. They came out in a matchup zone in the second half. They didn't do it in the first half, and they did it with maybe one possession. That was the only difference defensively for them. And it took us a little while to understand what we had talked about doing once they went to their zone. It was really going to be the same offensive game plan it always has been against Oregon. We need to just keep getting movement and then getting the ball swung from side to side. And we got a little stagnant early, in the second half offensively, until we kind of realized that they were playing a zone, and then, bottom line, you heard from the guys, that the turnovers was the name of the game, and just put too much pressure on our defense. On offensive hesitancy. I talked about it a couple of timeouts. I felt like the guys did turn down some good shots when we got them in rotations, and I don't know if that was just because early on we were talking to him about getting the ball moved a little bit more. But I did think we turned down some good shots when we got him in rotations, and we got a couple good ones that I think could have got us back in the game. You know, I remember Neek had a really good open look at the top. Jabari had a really good look from 3 that I think could have cut it to like 7. And we had it right there. But you know, we just weren't able to make those shots. But yes, I felt like we made a few extra passes that we didn't have to, and we had some good looks. On loss of energy at the end. I don't know if I would agree with him that the guys kind of quit. You know, I think that when they're not playing well and they're turning it over, they kind of get in a little bit of a mindset where, oh, here we go again, and we can't get out of it. I thought that guys still for the most part tried pretty hard.
Krieger seeks to follow path to impartial and fair justice.
When Leandra Krieger settled into her new chambers at California's highest court 7 years ago, she asked her top assistant to place the reports from the U.S. Supreme Court on the shelf behind her desk. It was an unusual request for a state court that does not frequently deal with matters of federal law, but Krieger wanted the justice's latest rulings nearby, said attorney Greg Wolf, the former head of her chambers. She just wanted them within reach, Wolf said. I think the U.S. Supreme Court is her first love. Krieger, an associate justice on the California Supreme Court, may herself be within reach of a seat on the nation's highest court. She is one of several black women, judges and lawyers, whose names are being circulated as possible picks by President Joe Biden to replace retiring Justice Stephen Breyer. Krieger, 45, is admired by colleagues and observers for her sharp intellect, modesty and skill forging consensus. She has the ability to persuade judges who are coming from a very different place than she is, said retired California Court of Appeal Justice J. Anthony Klein. People listen to her. She's not bombastic. She's not confrontational. She's not highly ideological. But she's very analytical. She's very committed to the law. Krieger was a law clerk to the late U.S. Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens in 2003 to 2004, worked at 2 law firms, taught law for a year and then worked several years at the U.S. Justice Department before becoming a judge. I just don't know how you match those skills. She, to me, is remarkable, said California Chief Justice Tani Cantil-Sakauye. Krieger grew up in South Pasadena, a leafy upper-middle-class suburb close to downtown Los Angeles, a daughter of 2 pediatricians. Her mother is Jamaican and her late father was Jewish. She graduated with honors from Harvard, where she wrote for the Harvard Crimson, the school's newspaper.
The Miss USA's tragedy has become a grim TikTok obsession.
Chesley Christ's final TikTok is about M&Ms. In the video, she's clutching a package of pink and white candies with her miniature likeness printed on them. When you shoot a TV segment at the M&Ms store and they surprise you with M&Ms with your face and name printed on them, reads the caption on screen. Christ holds the candy and mouths the words of a popular TikTok audio, "Okay, I like it, Picasso." She grins at the camera, eyebrows arched high and smooth skin perfectly lit. I likely would have never seen this video if Chesley Christ had not died by suicide after jumping from a building in Manhattan earlier this week. The attorney and 2019 Miss USA winner turned extra correspondent also had an active TikTok account with hundreds of thousands of followers. I was not among them, but the very day after her death, TikTok showed me that M&M video on my For You page. I watched it multiple times, my eyes and brain instinctively scanning it, looking for anything that might make sense of the question we all ask when the senseless happens: why? There is, of course, nothing to be found hidden among the box of chocolates or Christ's perfect curls. There is only the sadness of a world now short of a person who should still be here. Many of the comments on Christ's final videos reflect this sentiment. Well-meaning people, most of whom are likely strangers to her, are leaving notes of peace and sympathy on her TikToks. But scattered alongside them is an alarming number of comments from people unwilling to believe Christ's death did not involve foul play. There are now strangers coming to Christ's videos looking for clues, amateur sleuths casting her as the star in TikTok's latest true crime drama. Are they sure she wasn't pushed?
Sarita Chowdhury on, and just like that, an Indian representation.
HBO's follow-up to the Sex and the City series and films, and just like that, has divided viewers and critics. Some find it a bit cringe, others are adjusting to some major character absences, and plenty are watching out of sheer nostalgia. As a recent convert to Sex and the City fandom, I can only tell you this, and just like that, hidden gem is Sarita Chowdhury, who plays the powerful and ethereally self-confident luxury real estate broker Seema Patel. It would do both Kim Cattrall and Chowdhury a disservice to say that the latter is replacing the former. Samantha Jones was unabashedly and happily herself. But if AJLT gets a second season pickup, I hope the writers will make more use of Chowdhury's ability to balance sex appeal, precision, and vulnerability. The show needs her in the mix. Some may have only met Chowdhury via HBO last year, but I've been following her work since I sneakily checked out a copy of her debut film, Mira Nair's Mississippi Masala, from the Fort Worth Public Library. The interracial romance, starring Chowdhury and one Denzel Washington, was a watershed moment for both South Asian representation and for my 8th grade self. I had the chance to speak with Chowdhury just before the AJLT season finale. Among our discussion topics, bicycling in New York City, the nuances of Seema's flawlessness, and what it's like to miss India, our home. When we meet Seema in episode 4, you do something most Indian women in their 40s and 50s don't do that often. You call out a white woman. You do it very respectfully, very gently. When you read that scene, what was your reaction? I loved that scene when I read it. It's what made me want to do the series, actually, because I never saw it as a calling out. In the previous scene, my feelings got a little hurt. And then, when I'm being told I've hurt her because of the photograph, I realized, oh, these two are equal.
Bill to ban sport hunting of wildcats fails after a 3-hour hearing State Senate committee.
A bill to eliminate recreational trapping and hunting of mountain lions, bobcats, and lynx in Colorado went down to defeat Thursday after encountering plenty of opposition from a coalition of 20 hunting, angling, and wildlife conservation groups and their members. The bill would ban hunting for sport, but allow hunting to protect people or for scientific purposes. Thursday's hearing was almost as much a strong show of support for the State Division of Parks and Wildlife and its wildlife management plan as it was about the bill itself. Canadian lynx, which is included in the bill, is not legally hunted in Colorado and at least 13 other western states. The species, classified as a threatened species by the federal government, was just reintroduced in 2011 in Colorado. Senate Bill 31 lost 3 of its 4 prime sponsors in between its introduction on January 12 and its hearing in the Senate Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee today. That the bill got assigned to a committee, chaired by a West Slope Democrat who showed up at a press conference held by the coalition opposed to the measure, foretold the bill's fate. The committee's chair is rancher and President pro tem Carrie Donovan, D. Vale. The only question became just how long the hearing would go for a bill already destined to fail. The opposition crowd filled not only the old Supreme Court chamber but 3 overflow rooms on the 2nd and 3rd floors. SB 31 was sponsored by Senator Sonia Jaquez Lewis, D. Longmont, and initially co-sponsored by Senator Joanne Ginal, D. Fort Collins, and, in the House, by Representatives Judy Amabile, D. Boulder and Monica Duran, D. Wheat Ridge. By the end of last week, Jaquez Lewis was left standing alone in support of the bill, the brainchild of the Humane Society of the United States. Jaquez Lewis said during Thursday's hearing she had never heard so much comment about a bill in her legislative career.
U.S. says new intel shows Russia plotting false flag attack.
The U.S. accused the Kremlin on Thursday of an elaborate plot to fabricate an attack by Ukrainian forces that Russia could use as a pretext to take military action against its neighbor. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said the scheme included production of a graphic propaganda video that would show staged explosions and use corpses and actors depicting grieving mourners. The U.S. has not provided detailed information backing up the claims. The plan for a fake attack on Russian territory or Russian-speaking people was described in declassified intelligence shared with Ukrainian officials and European allies in recent days. It was the latest example of the Biden administration divulging intelligence findings, a tactic to attempt to stop Russian disinformation efforts and foil what it says is Russian President Vladimir Putin's effort to lay the groundwork for military action. If Russia does invade, administration officials say they want to make clear Russia had always sought to create a pretext. In recent weeks, the White House has said that U.S. intelligence shows Russia has launched a malign social media disinformation campaign against Ukraine and has dispatched operatives trained in explosives to carry out acts of sabotage against Russia's own proxy forces. Britain has divulged intelligence findings that it says show Russia plotting to install a pro-Russian puppet government in Ukraine. We've seen these kinds of activity by the Russians in the past, and we believe it's important when we see it like this and we can, to call it out, Kirby told reporters at the Pentagon. The administration has repeatedly declined to detail evidence underlying its intelligence findings. State Department spokesman Ned Price said Thursday the administration needed to protect sensitive sources and intelligence gathering methods.
The world headlines.